All right, guys, GT4 here at Sonoma Raceway. This car belongs to Johnny, the owner and founder of Lightspeed Track Events. He's had this car for, I think, a couple of years now. It's his first Porsche, and he's done some really fast times here, 143.89 here at Sonoma Raceway. Fairly close to stock, actually. It's got stock dampers with some lowering springs, running Supercar 3R tires, and then some Paragon upgraded rotors and R7 pads. But I've never driven a PDK GT4 on track, and especially not one that's pretty much stock. So I'm very curious to see how this is gonna go. You know, $120,000 plus or minus 10 grand for a 718 GT4. This one's a 2021, by the way. Does Porsche's entry-level GT product still feel like an excellent car on track? That's what I'm gonna find out. Everyone here is super fast and has a very expensive car. So I'll probably be in the slower half of this group. mid-engine balance with the strut rear suspension, very front heavy brake bias, and the amount of bite with these R7 pads, it makes corner entry tricky. It's not something that I can immediately hop in and feel comfortable. I mean, my lap time was terrible, 1 minute 48 seconds. That's not that much faster than me and my Integra Type S, only about 2 seconds. And this car has much stickier tires. It's got more power, the mid-engine balance, of course, and the throttle response. But yeah, I'm not doing this car justice. Definitely trickier to drive than I expected. Lift-off oversteer is very sudden with this car, and actually the way it handles bumps can sometimes upset the car. The suspension of this car definitely could be better. With just stock dampers and lowering springs, it's a little unsettled. The car is very capable though. It's just that the learning curve is pretty high, I would say. I'm a lot more comfortable with front engine rear wheel drive, mostly because of the corner entry behavior. With this car, I feel like I'm very timid you tap the brakes slightly too hard or you brake slightly too late, the rear end just comes out on corner entry immediately, and it doesn't give you a whole lot of leeway to catch it. You have to correct it very quickly. So giant props to Johnny for pulling off a sub 144. That is a very impressive lap time. Definitely not that beginner friendly. And now that my camera has died because it's boiling in here, let me know what you guys think of the GT4, guys. Big shout out to Johnny, big shout out to Lightspeed. See you all on the next one.